amendment proposed thereto.
When the debate was interrupted, Clare Curran was speaking and she has 1 minute 40 seconds remaining to speak should you wish to take it. Clare Curran.
Mr. Speaker, I was talking last night about how this government makes stuff up in the budget and its policies, and the elaborate charade that this country has been put through for the last 2.5 years while the Minister for Communications, Miscommunications and Misinformation, Stephen Joyce, works out how to give almost $1.5 billion to Telecom to roll out our newest and most important network of ultra-fast broadband. Telecom, which in 2009 helped pay for a report which argued why ultra-fast broadband wasn't necessary, which has spent much time in the last 2 years trying to delay a decision on broadband because it believes its existing copper network is sufficient for the country's broadband needs, which has no incentive to get a wriggle on and deliver fibre to the doors of the people of New Zealand, which will continue to do what it's always done, which is look after its own interests, not the interests of New Zealand. And Stephen Joyce, who couldn't get away with handing Telecom a 10-year regulatory holiday or oversight or an exemption from the Commission on oversight on price, will still shortly force through a law in this Parliament which will, amongst other things, allow the prices of our existing broadband on copper to go up while the new network gets installed. And there's no guarantees that the vast majority of people will actually get connected for years to come. Take Dunedin, Invercargill, Napier, Wanganui, just for starters. When are they going to get broadband? Don't hold your breath is all I can say. There are gaping holes in this program. Where, Mr. Speaker, in the budget is the allocation of new money which will be needed.
Order. The member's time has expired. The Honourable Chris Finlayson.
Mr. Speaker, it's been very disappointing to have to listen to members opposite recite what could only be described as a farrago of incoherent bullet points prepared for them by the Labour Research Unit. I've listened to Clare Curran, to Carol Beaumont, to Brendan Burns and to Darian Fenton, but they've all said the same thing, all with the same lack of enthusiasm, all with the same lack of conviction. It's a pity, Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party Research Unit minions have to waste their time writing drivel for Labour backbenchers. They would be much more constructively engaged explaining to reporters Mr. Goff's R&D policy, because he certainly can't explain it. Mr. Speaker, this budget continues to chart the course from recession to recovery, and it's based on a number of key principles, and it's worthwhile reviewing these principles. The first one is faster economic growth. Forecast economic growth is 4% in 2012, with 170,000 new jobs being created by 2015. Secondly, higher national savings. Changes to KiwiSaver will increase private savings, reduce government borrowing for subsidies and lift national savings. Getting back to surplus. We will return the budget to surplus in 2014-2015, a year sooner than was forecast in December. Repaying debt. Average net weekly borrowing will fall by over 2/3 to about $100 million in 2011-2012, and the government will start repaying debt in 2014-2015. Rebuilding Christchurch. We have created the $5.5 billion Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Fund for infrastructure and schools, temporary housing, trades training, welfare and business support, and CBD demolition costs. A huge job. And all I can say is thank goodness that at this critical time Canterbury has Jerry Brownlee at the helm. Strengthening education. Schools and early childhood education will receive an extra $1.4 billion in operating and capital funding out to 2014-2015, with total education spending rising to a record, listen to it, $12.2 billion in 2011-2012. Mr. Speaker, constantly vilified by the NZEI branch of the Labour Party, Anne Tolley is the best Minister of Education in living memory. Then we have strengthening health. This budget delivers an extra $2.2 billion to public health services over the next 4 years, including an additional, for Mr Okenvold's sake, $585 million in initiatives in 2011-2012. Most people run a mile from the health portfolio. Mr Robertson should surely be running from the shadow portfolio because it makes one wistful for Ruth. But Tony Ryle revels in the job. He's admired by everyone. Focusing on frontline services. We're reining in our unaffordable expenditure while protecting our most vulnerable citizens and keeping a keen focus on improving the performance of frontline services, particularly in the justice area. And in this regard, sir, I express my admiration for my colleague Simon Parr, who's done 9 years' work in 3 years. He's a great minister and a fine parliamentarian whose contribution to public life will never be forgotten. And finally, building infrastructure. The government infrastructure program receives $1.6 billion more for ultra-fast broadband, fibre connections and Kiwi Rail, and thanks to my very clever and capable colleague Stephen Joyce. So, Mr Speaker, we are safe managers of the economy in tough times. Tough times mean tough choices, and this government hasn't been afraid to make them. Now, Labour has a problem. In fact, it's got a few problems. It criticises every government move to reduce spending, but refuses to say that it will reverse those reductions. Now, we all remember the Axe the Tax bus and the crowds of 2 or 3 people who would turn up to greet it. Now it turns out they're not axing the tax after all, though they apparently want to spend about $250 million taking $250 million, Mr Okenvold, taking GST off food to save the average New Zealand family $1.50 a week. Middle New Zealand will be pleased to know that under Labour they would no longer have to pay GST on Alban truffles, currently selling at $6,000 a kilogram, $30 a kilogram Californian pomegranates, and Philippine figs at $2, and judging from what I heard about Mr Okenvold yesterday, perhaps he had too many of those. So much, Mr Speaker, for Michael Joseph Savage's Party of the People. And not content with this, Labour's also promising billions more for expensive programs like Annette King's Ministries for Everything. Apparently Labour's policy to fix New Zealand is to create new ministers and new ministries, new departments for everything. It's called the Hail Mary pass approach. Throw something up in the air and hope that somebody will catch it. New Zealanders deserve better than this. They don't want more waffle, they don't want more ministries, they want their government to focus on what works. That's what this government is doing. But, Mr Speaker, what is the Honourable Phil Goff doing?
What does he do?
Well, he used to be the figurehead. He used to be the social democratic store mannequin on which Labour projected their latest ideas of what middle New Zealand voters might like. The leader of the opposition did more costume changes during his first year in opposition than Lady Gaga. Mr Goff was photographed everywhere, chopping wood in the Sunday Star Times, riding his motorbike in the Listener. Oh, the member for Wellington Central is so 1950s, get with it. But this year, I say to Mr Robertson, we've had nothing but silence. Clare Curran was so frustrated that Mr Goff was making no headway as a great southern man that she decided yesterday it was for her to take up the challenge. The only surprise about her performance at question time yesterday is that she didn't turn up with a sheep slung over her shoulders. You see, with Labour, it's all about style over substance. Nowhere is that more evident than in their attitude to the arts. Let's look at the film industry. National has always championed the film industry. We formed the Film Commission in 1978, although Helen Clark liked telling people she formed it, another example of her zealous regard for the truth. Only last week, the member for Wellington Central was talking about film as a contributor to Wellington's economy. But look at his party's behaviour over the Hobbit last year. When it came down to a choice between trade union Australian thugs and the New Zealand film industry, the Hobbit haters in the opposition sold out the film industry faster than one could say unobtainium, that precious metal so sought after by earthlings in Avatar, which of course was created in Weta Workshop. And Mr. Robertson's never seen Avatar because he's so uncool. And the same thing can be said about New Zealand music. Labour gets all excited about New Zealand Music Month, but for this government, every month is New Zealand Music Month. Turning up to a few functions, eating canapes, doesn't amount to supporting the arts in my book. So we have a wonderful story to tell about the arts. We have a wonderful story to tell about the budget. These are the areas of core focus for this John Key-led government. We will always walk what we talk. This is a great budget, and I say to the member for Clutha Southland, well done, faithful servant.
Grant Robertson.